Hi again. In the last part, we looked at some of the overall concepts about engineering projects, and in this one, we're going to look at some of the details of what a project manager does and how to manage your own projects. There are three general stages to a project, and indeed, in many people, they also include a fourth, which we'll talk about later. The first is the concept, the high-level idea of why you're doing the project and what it will achieve. Second part of the project is the planning of the project, how you will do it, in what order you will perform the tasks, and how you will measure success. The third part is the execution. This is where you actually deliver the project and work on the various facets of the project. I said earlier that there's a fourth, and the fourth one is often the closeout or the completion of the project, where you wrap up all the paperwork and the administration, and you finally hand over the project to the end client. First of all, let's look at the concept of a project. I said earlier it's a high level, and the first thing to do is understand the goals and objectives of the project and what you will deliver to the client. Once you understand that, then you can convene a project definition workshop to agree the scope, time, and cost estimates for the project. Once you've done that, write it down. Codify the scope of the project and work out how you're going to deliver the project. Identify the team who will deliver the project and who will actually help you along the way there. And then look at background research within the project to find out of the areas that you may not be fully familiar with about the project. The last part of the concept stage is the most important. You need to gain approval from your sponsor or your client before progressing further, because it's important that you deliver the project that they want, not the one that you want to work on. And this is a key part, and often a part that many engineers fail on, is they do the clever engineering, but they fail to get buy-in from the customer, and hence the project fails. When you call a project definition workshop, first thing is establish why you're doing the project, and then establish the objectives. What will you attain when you do the projects? How will you attain it? Once you've got the broad why and how, establish the activities and who owns each activity. It's very useful to assign a particular piece of work to an individual and hold them as responsible for delivering that work. They may be assisted by other members of the team, but it's important that you have one person that's leading each piece of work. They can work out the detailed or the sub-detail of the concept, scope, design, build, test of the parts within their part of the project and feel they've got ownership of it and they'll deliver things. Establish a budget for the project. That's not just a budget in money, but also resources. How many people, how many person days do you want to assign to each task, and work that up into your overall project plan. Work out a risk register, and we'll talk about risk registers later and why they're so important. And organisation, project manager and key roles. I've worked as a project manager, I've also worked as a key engineer or lead engineer on projects, and the two are separate and uniquely identifiable roles. The project manager is very concerned with when will things get done, how much will they cost, and what do they impact. The lead engineer is challenged with will they meet the specification, how will they meet the specification with the least risk, and do all the parts of the project tie together. Within any project, you've got to establish a governance plan. Who's going to run the project? And I would suggest it's a project executive team. And finally, document any external dependencies. Things you have identified that you may require supply by others, or things that you must have in place before the project can commence. Insurance or financial plans and things like that. This slide is a rather busy slide, but I would leave you to read it in detail. But here are some of the roles that you'd expect to see in a commercial project. First thing is compliance manager. Make sure that everybody on the site is kept safe and that all appropriate regulations, environmental regulations, are being followed. Financial manager is looking after the money. And in your project, because there's no real money per se, I would suggest that that also looks after some of the resources and who gets supplied and who charges their head and their head count onto each part of the project. The quality manager is there to ensure that the project is addressed in a proper fashion and you follow all the relevant standards applying to this particular piece of work. Marketing manager, I won't say too much about now because there's marketing later on in the course. Design manager is pulling together all the different design elements. They're trying to make sure that everything fits together under one project and you don't have different parts of the project addressing different standards and then not working at interface. Biggest problem with projects I see with student projects is at the interfaces between two different students doing two different pieces of work, and when you come to join them together, they fail because the two students have not discussed any changes they have made in the pieces of work. And finally, the production manager is looking at how the project is actually going to be built. Let's now look at the project plan. There's many different methods of doing planning. It's something I do a lot with my Chinese students, but I don't have time to do that here because it's a full course. First thing to do is build a detailed plan using timeline, Gantt charts, network diagrams, and identify the resource requirements on every task that you've identified. Does it require one person? Does it require two people? Does it require compute resources? Does it require hardware? And also prepare a costing. Costing should be done in both manpower and in financial terms so that you can identify where the major costs are within your project. Within your governance, work out a communication plan. How often are you going to talk to your client or your customer? Are you going to do it once a week, once a month? And what are you going to have in that communications plan? I have never done a project that was perfect from day one. Projects always change along the route of the project. And you have to establish a method of ensuring that change management can be incorporated in that. We'll talk about that later. And the last one is risk register and issue management. When problems occur, how do you deal with them? You can't stop the whole project, all get together in a room, unless the issue is very serious. What is the method of escalation if someone on the project discovers it? And then get your team ready. You need to establish what the responsibilities are, what they are working on, and when they have to do it. And the last point is a formal sign-off of your plan with the sponsor or the customer so that to make sure that they buy in to the concept that you're proposing within your project. We've all seen a Gantt chart like this. Every project produces a Gantt chart. Every Gantt chart looks like this. Every time I see one like this, it's always wrong. The reason that it's so wrong is it does a beautiful waterfall from the left-hand side down to the right-hand side, and everything ends at the right time. There's very little interlinkage between them, and that's when problems start with projects. By all means, prepare a Gantt chart, but look carefully at what you can do in parallel in the Gantt chart. Serially or arranging a project just means you're probably wasting time during the build of the project to deliver the end goal. Last part of the project is the execution, and this is when you're actually doing the work of the project. I'm not going to go into the detail of execution because each project will be different and you will all know of your own particular skills, whether it's electrical engineering, civil engineering, aeronautical engineering. You will all have a good understanding of the technical aspects of your project. Thank you very much for listening for that, and we'll now go on to part 3. Thank you.